Tonight on PhillyCAM Voices, I have interviewed two state legislators on the subject of President Biden's marijuana pardon program, where he has pardoned all federal simple marijuana offenses. And the other segment is a recap of the 2022 elections, where I interviewed citizens in Philadelphia and went through the issues that were most important to voters in our area. On October 6th of this year, President Biden issued a proclamation pardoning all federal simple marijuana convictions. I sat down and interviewed two Pennsylvania state senators, State Senator Sharif Street, who has led on criminal justice reform and ending cannabis prohibitions in the Senate. He's also passed legislation to increase accessibility and affordability for PA's medical marijuana marketplace and has advanced legislation to decriminalize cannabis as well as legalizing its adult use. I also interviewed State Senator Tim Carney, who is one of the co-sponsors on legislation to legalize marijuana or cannabis in Pennsylvania. We discussed what effects President Biden's federal pardon for simple marijuana offenses would have on citizens in Pennsylvania, and if it's a good idea or not.
It was a great idea. Cannabis is now legal in some way, shape, or form in probably 2/3 of states. And the vast overall majority of Americans don't believe that people who merely consumed or purchased small amounts of cannabis are criminals. By pardoning those folks, he creates greater opportunity for them to live lives without being hampered by drug convictions. And he also sends an important message, a message that the era of the war on people using drugs as an excuse should be over. While cannabis usage amongst Black and brown folks, Black, brown, white folks is all relatively simple. Black and brown people are 4 to 5 times more likely to be subject to being arrested or convicted of cannabis violations than their white counterparts are. There's always been desperate enforcement, and therefore the people walking around with those drug convictions are more likely to be Black and brown. And since it was unfair from the beginning and unreasonable completely, I think this was a good idea, both in terms of the help it provides for the people that are impacted directly and the messaging it says about what we should be doing as a broader society around cannabis.
State Senator Carney echoed the sentiment about a war on Black and brown people.
Definitely a good idea, and President Biden was right to do so. The war on drugs was basically a racially motivated, really at the start, and enforcement of all our drug laws has disproportionately hurt Black and brown communities. The problem, of course, is that Biden's order doesn't go far enough, and that's because at its heart, it's really most of this is a state issue. It needs to be dealt with on the state level.
In Pennsylvania, we had a similar clemency program in which over 2,500 applications were received. That program's now finished. Will a similar program be adopted or enacted next year?
Well, that's ultimately the decision of Lieutenant Governor Davis, but I'm confident that Lieutenant Governor Austin Davis will put in place, working with a newly selected pardon secretary, a program that addresses those issues. Each lieutenant governor's got to figure out how he wants to do it, but I think this lieutenant governor recognizes and respects the need for the goals of the program, and certainly he'll design his own program. But I think the concepts and goals will live on in the new administration.
And I don't know if you know the answer to this, but what types of people will be affected by this pardon program, especially in Delaware County and Philadelphia? What types of people?
So Governor Wolf's program gave expedited pardons to individuals who've been convicted of possession of marijuana and or small amounts personal use of marijuana. So these two convictions alone affected tens of thousands of people in Pennsylvania. You want to keep going on this?
Yeah, go ahead.
However, the pardon program left out all those individuals who had more convictions on their record than those two. So anyone who is charged with crimes beyond those two very limited aspects, for things like possession of drug paraphernalia, where they weren't able to apply for this pardon, or they would be disqualified. So that left tens of thousands of people out as well, mainly because prosecutors stack up as many charges as they can, particularly around drug issues. So in the end, the program was only open for a month, and because of these limitations, only about 250 Pennsylvanians were able to receive that expedited pardon, and over 2,000 people who applied were disqualified. So the program needs to be, we need to learn the lessons from the first rollout. We need to make adjustments to the program, and we need to get it rolled out one more time.
I asked Senator Street the same question.
The state and the federal programs are a little different. The federal program was designed only for people who had small amounts of cannabis possession. The state program was a little bit broader and allowed greater latitude in the types of folks who were able to get pardons. But the goals of both folks are people who are convicted of cannabis-related felonies or even simple misdemeanors to be able to clear their record. It affects people's ability to get a job, get housing, access, a number of certain kinds of resources. And so it's really important. Like I said, the people who will be disproportionately affected are going to be Black and brown folks. And one other thing I got to say, we don't keep data on it, but it's clear that poor white people were much more likely to get convicted of cannabis crimes than rich white people. Who ever heard of them going through a rich white neighborhood and locking people up for smoking weed? But we do know in some poor white communities or poor white people having to live near Black and brown people, or poor white folks are much more likely to be arrested than wealthier white folks. So it's going to help Black folk, brown folk, poor white folk. Those are people that are more likely to be helped. And those are people that need the greatest amount of help in society.
And so when a person is pardoned, since we're speaking about employment, how does this open up other economic opportunities for the pardon recipient?
Well, in many states, there are entire fields that you are not able to apply for if you're convicted of a drug crime, and so it opens up entire careers. There are people who can't work in hospitals, can't work around children, can't work for certain kinds of government positions or financial services. Those kinds of careers open up, and so it opens up entire industries to people.
So it basically is a life-changing event, I would say.
Yep.
Besides getting a pardon, what else can people do to have access to jobs and services they may not have access to?
Beyond the process, not only for getting the pardon, but you should go one step further and get it expunged from your record. And that's possible. There are clinics. We run at least 2 or 3 expungement clinics a year out of my office here that we do with folks in Philadelphia and Delaware County. So expungement becomes the way to really sort of clean stuff up and prevent that kind of again, these kind of red flags that might come up if you're applying for a job or applying for housing.
When I was researching this, it looked like there wasn't a lot of, I'll call it public relations around the program where people would even know they had an opportunity to get a pardon or a possible pardon. What do you think about that?
Well, it's, anytime we deal with issues like this in the legislature, um, it's very difficult. You have uh, people, there are people in the legislature who have a very sort of law and order kind of um, way about dealing things. So um, they might sort of hold their nose and let this kind of happen, but they're not going to really push it out there in the ways that it comes. We always have difficulty getting the word out to folks about these kinds of programs because most people aren't really checking our website on a regular basis, or they're really not watching the news necessarily. So we need, frankly, Connie, we need people like you to help us get the word out that these things are out there and a possibility.
Now, I know that you sponsored Senate Bill 473 to legalize marijuana in Pennsylvania. Why do you think that was a good idea or is a good idea?
Well, I think it's a good idea because it will create jobs. I think the bill also called for the expungement or sealing of the records of all people previously convicted of exclusively cannabis crimes. It created a social equity license to make sure there's diversity in cannabis. It would be good for Pennsylvania's tourism, and it would also be good for our rural communities, as well as there are people who have what are probably undiagnosed issues like stress or things where cannabis could be helpful. And then finally, it's going to be good for the economy, and the tax revenue can be used to address issues like education or reducing property taxes.
I asked Senator Carney why he co sponsored Senate Bill 473 to legalize marijuana.
It's at one level, from a very pragmatic and practical aspect, it's going to happen. It's sort of inevitable. All our neighboring states are already in the process, if they haven't already, legalized recreational. The trick to me is not whether or not to do it, but to do it responsibly and correctly. So there's lots of lessons to be learned from other states' experiences and things that they have done.
Some people say that marijuana is a gateway drug and that it'll lead to the use of harder, more dangerous drugs. What would you say to reassure people regarding that concern?
The data simply doesn't reflect that. We have data now from other states, and what we find is that where you have legalized cannabis usage, the opioid addiction goes down because cannabis is now regulated. The places where people buy it are less likely to sell it to teens, so teen drug use goes down, teen cannabis use goes down. And because people can use cannabis for chronic pain, and it is not addictive as opposed to opioids. Opioid addiction, which begins in legal use for pain relief, expands to cannabis. That's why a carpenters union, a firefighters union, and many people who are in physically taxing jobs, unions to represent those folks, are strong proponents of allowing cannabis use by their members.
Regarding marijuana as a gateway drug to the use of other harder, more dangerous drugs, Senator Carney's response was,
I think that's generally a misunderstanding, and it's one based on fear. Sometimes some people say when they were trying to look back and figure out why someone is addicted to heroin or something, or the hard drugs, and it's an easy sort of thing to make in your mind that there's a connection between marijuana and or cannabis and harder drugs. But science does not support that at all. We regulate and allow for all sorts of addictions. I mean, from gambling to cigarettes to alcohol, and cannabis in and of itself is not as habit forming as nicotine is. And there are ways that it can be regulated responsibly. In ways that don't justify the criminalization of Black and brown people.
I asked Senator Carney if he had any final thoughts for our viewers. Here they are.
I think that there's definitely people in our communities who are scared about this and think that it's just going to lead to more problems. And I think the fact that Pennsylvania is taking its time on this, they are trying to learn the lessons from other states, from other places where it's happened. I really do believe that we can roll this out in a way that can benefit the people of Pennsylvania much more than any detriment that it would bring. And that, we in the legislature, we have a responsibility for understanding that and for understanding what the impact is on the various communities and how it goes forward. So I'm going to continue to support this, but I'm only going to support it in a way where it can benefit the communities that were most had the hardest time with the war on drugs and the way it was working. So we have an opportunity to rectify, which we don't often have. And so I'd like to see it move forward that way.
Look, I think people overwhelmingly support the cannabis. We need people to reach out to their legislators at the state and federal level. If in your state cannabis is not already legal, if you're in Pennsylvania like I am, talk to the legislators, talk to the incoming governor's administration, let them know that it is time for the prohibition of cannabis to end. We can use the tax revenue. We want to advance criminal justice. We want to help our small farmers. We want to help inner city people that have been hit by the war on cannabis. We want to benefit from the economic opportunities and the tax revenue. We want cannabis legalization passed in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania now.
It was predicted that this year the midterm election would be a red wave for the Republicans. Pundits said they would pick up 60 seats in the House and retake the Senate. In Pennsylvania, they believed they would take both houses in the legislature and the governor's office. While Republicans were crowing like House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, saying, "The base of the new Republican Party is energized and ready to take power," then the Republican primary voters nominated bad candidates that were election deniers, anti-abortion, anti-gun reform, for restricting the right to vote, pro-Trump, and in some cases insurrectionists to represent them in the general elections. Many people believed that these candidates were going to take their rights away. The Democrats started as early as January, letting people know what was at stake in this election: democracy or dictatorship. And they started a ground game of registering voters, knocking on doors, and calling people to get the vote out.
We need you. We need you to sign up for one more canvassing shift.
That's right.
One more phone bank.
That's right.
Remind 3 more of your friends to get out and vote on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah.
We need you to show up and show out, okay?
Yes.
And we need Pennsylvania to have Josh Shapiro as our next governor.
Yeah.
And not one, but 2 opportunities to flip a seat from red to blue in the state house right here in Delco.
Yeah. While this was occurring, President Biden was getting things done for the American people.
Newt's column yesterday, but he said Republicans keep making the same mistake. They keep underestimating Joe Biden. What Joe Biden's done with a small majority has been nothing short than awe-inspiring. He should be compared to Reagan and Eisenhower. And if they want to keep making fun of his memory or the way he walks or the way he talks, they can do that. Joe Biden will just keep beating them. And so you add to that Donald Trump's insanity. Right. Its association with Kanye, which let's not even get started.
Let's set that aside. There's more there.
And the extremism of the Republicans that are taking over that. You know, if it's just backbenchers.
Right.
The Republicans thought by having rallies with Donald Trump, that would energize their voters. and Democrats were speaking to voters about issues that really matter.
Everybody talks about each election being the most important one of our time. Was probably 2016 and we won. So we have to work a lot harder right now to claw back our democracy, to make sure we're protecting our freedoms, whether it's the freedom to vote, the freedom to make reproductive health care decisions, the freedom to marry who we want. All of those freedoms are on the line this year. And we need people like Josh Shapiro to protect those freedoms.
Y'all, let me explain this. That's right. It's not freedom to tell women what they're allowed to do with their bodies. It's not freedom to tell our kids what books they're allowed to read in school. That's not freedom. It's not freedom to say you can work a 40-hour work week, but you can't be a member of a union. That's not freedom. It's not freedom to fail to invest in our communities year after year after year, leaving people in poverty and then tell them to pick themselves up by the bootstraps. That's not freedom. Let me tell you, with all these guys trying to take away our votes all the time, it's not freedom to say you all can go vote, but they're going to pick the winners. That's not freedom. That's not how it works. Let me tell you what real freedom looks like. Here's real freedom. When you look at that child in Upper Darby and you see the potential in her, so you invest in her public schools to give her a shot. That's real freedom. Real freedom comes when we made her street safe so she could live till her 18th birthday. That's real freedom. Real freedom comes when, because we put VOTEC in our classrooms, we gave that child an opportunity to learn how to be an electrician. And she loved being an electrician. So she went to a union apprenticeship program that we funded, and that gave her an opportunity. Real freedom comes when that girl from Upper Darby starts a small business right here in the community, hires a whole bunch of people. They have family. They marry the people they love. They worship where they want. They plant roots in a community that respects them. That is real freedom, and that is what
I went to downtown Philadelphia to get reactions from citizens on their thoughts about the election results. Here's what they had to say. What do you think about the outcome of the midterm election?
I'm happy with the outcome. I think they were fair and free, and I'm very pleased that everybody had a voice.
Overall, I'm happy with the outcome of the midterm elections. I'm happy that the Democrats held on to the Senate. Kind of disappointed that they lost the House. During the time of the midterm elections, I was actually out west in Las Vegas, Nevada, and that was one of the pivotal seats. And I'm glad that the Democrats were able to pull that one out because, like I said, it would have possibly given power in the Senate to the Republicans. I mean, they still have the Herschel Walker-Warnock race in Georgia, and I'm pulling for Senator Warnock. I mean, Herschel Walker he's not the sharpest pencil in the box.
All right.
I thought it was great because America spoke up, both locally, statewide, and nationally, that the American people aren't going to accept authoritarianism, whether it be the right to life marriage or woman's choice or, this false conspiracy that every time the Republicans lose, it's a fraudulent election. I mean, back on January 6th, 2020, John Joyce, a representative from Pennsylvania, stood up and said the Supreme Court is wrong. How can a Supreme Court be wrong if we base our judicial system on a Supreme Court? Think about it. But this Freedom Caucus and these right-wing religious zealots are not going to rule the country. The people are.
As far as this city is concerned, I am very happy. I'm glad the Democrats got a boost, and for this city, I think it's very important.
Then I asked, how do you think the outcome of the elections will affect the citizens of Philadelphia?
I know the city suffers from gun violence, so I'm hoping that sensible gun reform will come in, and we need the officials elected to make sure that happens.
All right.
I mean, I think from a national level, it may not have that much of an impact, but as far as the local races with Senator-elect Fetterman as well as Senator-elect Shapiro, I think that'll hopefully help. I think the Democrats took over the House for the first time in 12 years, so that may get some resources to Philadelphia. I doubt it'll do anything to tighten up the gun laws, but we may definitely get some resources in the city.
Well, I haven't been in Philadelphia for a while, but post-COVID, I think the whole nation knows that we have to secure our social safety net, because so much has been affected. And it's going to take years of study to see how bad it affected us. I was talking to my in-law last night over the Thanksgiving holiday, and he works for a beer company, Brooklyn Ale. And the whole industry has changed. The hotel industry has changed. So many industries. Look at Amazon laying off.
Rights, women's control of their own bodies, medical issues that Fetterman was fighting for, health insurance. I mean, he stressed that that's what he had, so he got over, getting better from his stroke. Better the advantages of the things. And Mehmet Oz wanted to leave women's rights, to the government. So I think we did well.
Here's what people said about the issues that were important to them in this election.
Woman's choice, women's choice basically, and the right to marry who you love. Okay? Take care. Have a nice Thanksgiving. All right.
I mean, the biggest issue was not electing those election deniers, those true MAGA people. And like I said, Arizona, Nevada, I'm glad that those Senate races went the other way. I think Alaska was decided yesterday, and they also, the Trump-based candidates lost there as well. So that was my biggest issue, not seeing a lot of those MAGA people get into power, because it just would have given more credibility to Trump, and he really shouldn't have as much credibility as he has already.
I asked, is there anything else you would like to add? Here's what some had to say.
Like I said, just the gun violence in the city of Philadelphia. I'd like to see something done with that, trying to reduce that if at all possible.
No, I hope everybody has a nice holiday. I hope people had a good Thanksgiving, and no, that's about it. Good luck to all of us for the next election.
This is Connie Calm for PhillyCAM Voices. Thank you for tuning in to this week's PhillyCAM Voices. You can also watch our show on YouTube and Roku, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We'll see you next time.